The world sits between two kinds of irrationality that constantly cause great harms, including democide and genocide. One, the tendency towards collective hysteria, and two, the tendency to interpret large scale emergent phenomena as designed by intent. We sit between them both today. Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today I wanted to follow up on a video, on a moment I did recently. And I'm going to talk about the other great threat to societies always. And one is what we're constantly talking about here on this moment series, which is collective hysteria. And we've been living through that for the last 2 years. And I've been also pushing back over and over again on folks who have trouble understanding that purposely initiating collective hysteria is impossible. It's actually impossible. It's well known. We all understand PR, we all understand marketing, and companies, they try to influence the crowd. All of these different kinds of forces are constantly trying to influence the crowds. And as we've talked about, sure, you can have influence. You want to induce virality, but it's the kind of thing that it's almost impossible to do. You have to do it thousands of times, and there's well-known distributions in terms of the rarity of very, very highly viral things. So you have to get lucky, and you can't plan on this. And I was mentioning in a recent moment video that one great reason why we have to get straight on this and why I'm obsessed about this is because if we want to see what's universal across all of these great democides, what's found across all of them are these kinds of collective hysterias and these new notions of righteousness, and it morally justifies for the good, for the sake of the good, to do these horrible things which completely destroy societies and peoples. Right? If you want to understand that, you have to understand what that universal is so that you can try to solve it. And this is what we're trying to do at FreeX. We want to identify that universal, which we believe it's collective hysteria. It's the same thing that we find across all of these great democides. So how can we go about attacking that, making it less likely? But there's another, so this pushback against these kinds of conspiracy theory kinds of thinking is in one way to say, no, we need to focus on the real universal. That's the stuff that causes these great harms. But another thing that I didn't mention is that another great human universal is the tendency to attribute emergent phenomena, emergent psychosocietal level phenomena, attribute it to evil intent. This is what humans are terrible at. One thing that humans are terrible at is that we get swept up in collective hysterias, and we get new notions of righteousness, and all of these things, which can sweep across, and they happen occasionally, usually in just one country here or there, and this time the whole world as of 2020. But the other thing that we have a tendency to do is that we misunderstand these collective forces. These are like Ouija boards with 1 million fingers on it. It's practically impossible for our brains to understand the actions of a Ouija board when there's just 4 people on it, right? You've got 2 hands each, and it ends up leads to stuff that none of us can understand. When you've got millions or billions of varying sized hands on a Ouija board, to understand the behavior of what the societies are doing and the movements within societies, you have to understand the nature of emergent phenomena. They are not due to even any individual group. They're due to the summed activity of thousands and millions of different groups of different sizes with different forces. You can't grasp that with your mind or my mind or any of our minds. It is beyond that kind of thing. But what we see, we see something that we say, okay, I am going to interpret it as having this kind of result. And then you want to create a story. You want to create a story that it's this particular group, and then you'll come up with some highly convoluted set of arrows that says it has to be that kind of group. And always in societies, there's the standard kinds of claims that this group, it was the Jews. So, in Nazi Germany, there was both mass hysteria, and then the other side is the tendency to attribute emergent phenomena towards some kind of design, evil design by people who are trying to do this to the world, to society. You had both of these things as part of the ingredients of genocide. These things are always with us. So we have the lockdowners who are swept up in mass hysteria, and then amongst the anti-lockdowners, you've got folks like me, but let's skip me, let's go to the other side. We have folks that are exactly having the opposite in terms of these two polarities, these two different kinds of human biases that we have a tendency toward, that they attribute everything. that's going on in the world to this, or it's the WHO, it's the China, it's this group. They're all related, they're all working together. And they don't understand, just like people have trouble understanding natural selection. There has to be a God to explain all this design. No, culture and the natural world are filled with the design. Look at these eyeballs that see. Nobody designed it. How is that possible? That should blow your mind. Culture is filled, society is filled at the large scales with lots of signs of seeming design, seeming coordination, right? It has to be, to build these beautiful eyes, beautifully functional eyes, required coordination, right? It had to be a designer. There is no designer that did it. It's through emergent phenomena, through complex things that we really can't fathom that led to this over long periods of time and large numbers of complex events. The same things, the same kinds of thinking is what you need to understand the actions of the large-scale movements of society. Right? These evil puppeteers on the anti-lockdown are not on our side. Team irrationality, we can't have anything to do with them. These people are as dangerous as those who are lockdowners. It's exactly that kind of thinking which leads to both preventing us from understanding what happened across all of the democides, and itself is its own danger. It leads to its own danger because they'll find their own targets, their own witches. What are witches, in fact, right? How can it be that the entire world had a magic spell put over them so that everywhere you went, you found people in their cars wearing masks? A spell had to be put on them, right? How is it possible that a spell was put on all of these people? And the answer is, well, it's because these people have been planning since 2005 to create a virus which would be doing this, which would get this vaccine, which would allow us to be tracked. All this was done in advance as a plan. This is exactly the stuff of witches, right? No group has the power to put a magical spell on people and make them wear masks in a useless way in cars. If you start coming up with elaborate theories about how they can do it, you are doing the same thing that people have done for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years concerning witches. She has the power to do this. It was her that bent the thoughts of the community to make us start thinking in this way. She did that, right? It's the same thing. It's actually mathematically impossible to engineer on purpose the kind of virality that happened. And it's well known, the kinds of distributions we've talked about. To claim that some group can do it is as bad as believing in magic, and is as bad as pointing to those who are witches. You start believing in witches, you start feeling justified to do bad things to witches, right? Which is exactly what people do. So the mass hysteria side started to believe that the unclean, unvaccinated were witches and justified doing all kinds of things. Well, but the other side, these emergent, these sort of evil designer folks, are also moving down a similar kind of path, where they're creating stories that have much better explanations in emergent phenomena. And furthermore, the only explanations can possibly be emergent phenomena, because you can't do the stuff that they're claiming that they can do. And it's a complete, naive, third-grade understanding of how societies work. I don't plan on getting any of them on my side. They are gone. They can't think straight. They don't know how to think about emergent phenomena. I'm trying to get you guys on the fence. If you're out of the hysteria and you weren't in it, great. But don't fall for these forces. These people do not know how to think. They don't understand emergent phenomena. They're thinking like pre-natural selection individuals who don't understand how emergent phenomena work, and those are the ingredients of understanding society. And that was your science moment. I encourage you to get yourself a copy of Expressly Human by Dr. Tim Barber and I. This is my 6th book, coming out of, again, research from someone that's worked on emergent phenomena, both in natural selection and across culture, and this is sort of a combination of both. Spent a whole career doing these kinds of things, which requires a very cross-disciplinary psychology, culture, cultural evolution, math, physics, These are the sorts of things that you have to understand to really diagnose and pick apart the kinds of things that we're seeing every day. The kinds of things that we're seeing every day aren't the stuff at the societal level, aren't the stuff that's going on with your friends, where Judy has said this and so explains because, well, Judy thinks that about Doug. And so, no, the stuff at the societal level don't get explained in the ways that we have natural, normal intuitions for. It's totally different in that realm, and you have to think totally differently. You have to think like a complexity theorist sort of person. And that was all.